Hello folks, the Y Guy here again. This is my eighth and final video on the Y Guy Asks What is Hell? And I'm going to conclude this video on this beautiful spring day. So if you hear some, I'm sitting outside, so if you hear some hummingbirds nearby, or a few yellow jackets and bees, whatever, flying by, you'll understand what the noise is, as well as maybe some rumble from the wind on the microphone. But I'm going to conclude this video by asking some questions to my viewers. Questions that arose within my own heart, within my own mind. And I'll reconsider my viewpoint on the doctrine of hell. I will reconsider that viewpoint if these questions can be answered satisfactory. So my first question is when was hell created? Is there a documentation? Is there anything? And I'm not talking about time, a timeline here. I just basically, when was hell created? Okay, and who created hell? That's an important question that came to my mind originally, before I had a paradigm shift about this topic. And where in Scripture does it describe the creation of hell and who created it? I couldn't find it anywhere in my Bible or any other religious text or anything. It's just not out there. I just couldn't find it. Well, I need those questions answered in order for me to reconsider my viewpoint. And since Paul wrote the majority of the New Testament, why didn't he preach the hell doctrine? I mean, the majority of what Christian believers believe of our day is the New Testament, and the majority of it was written by this guy named Paul, apostle, so why didn't he ever teach about it? Someone might say, well, you know, there is that one scripture that talks about, oh, death, where is your sting, and oh, hell, where is your victory? Well, folks, Paul was talking about the resurrection. What has hell got to do with resurrection? However, like I've said all along, if you translate hell properly, or they translate it improperly, as death or grave, then does it make sense dealing with resurrection for someone to say, oh death, where is your sting? And oh grave, where is your victory? There's not any victory in a grave if you're going to be resurrected out of it. Do you get my point? And that was Paul's point as well. Now, why didn't Jesus promote hell in the good news? If you read Jesus' definition of the good news, hell isn't even part of it. He never once taught on hell. My friend Kurt, hello Kurt, who pastors a large church here in our area, around his dinner table one night, he told me, he says, you know, Jesus taught about hell more than anyone else. Kurt, no, he didn't. He taught about Gehenna. And Gehenna obviously is a place that exists today. You can go visit it. It's in Jerusalem, right outside the walls there. It's a park. So it's literally a walk in the park. Well, another question I have to ask, why are the words death and grave, why are they properly translated in all Bibles when dealing with generalities and believers? Isn't it interesting that they are properly, death and grave are properly translated, dealing with believers especially. But, here's the big old but. When you talk about unbelievers in Scripture, it's all of a sudden translated death or grave, depending on the circumstance. Death or grave is translated as hell. Now wait a minute. You see, there's a lack of consistency here. All right, and there's a reason for it. There's an agenda. And I want to explain just a little bit of that agenda through some quotes from some church historians as well as church fathers. Augustine is one of them. And Augustine, he wrote, because I was wondering, why did Augustine promote hell? There had to be a reason for it. Now, I can ignore his research. If you read a little bit about Augustine, he was into Zoroastrianism, which is about 1000 BC, and he was a prophet of this cult that heavily promoted hell. So that could be a play on why Augustine believed in hell. Also, he followed the Manichaean doctrine too, even after being converted to Christianity. and I explained the Manichean doctrine in previous videos. You're just going to have to look that up. But here is something that Augustine said in his writings titled The City of God. Augustine speaking of the doctrine of hell. This seems to have been done on no other account, but as it was the business of princes, out of their wisdom and civil prudence, to deceive the people. To deceive the people in their religion. Princes, under the name of religion, persuaded the people to believe those things true, which they themselves knew to be idle fables. By this means, for their own ease and government, tying them the more closely to civil society. Okay, another one is Mosheim. He's a German church historian. I believe he's a Lutheran. Speaking of the 5th century, he says, and no one objected to Christians retaining their opinions of their pagan ancestors, respecting the souls, heroes, demons, temples, and the like, and as no one proposed utterly to abolish the ancient pagan institutions, but on to alter them somewhat and purify them. It was unavoidable that the religion and the worship of the Christians would in this way become corrupted. Okay, this I will also add, that the doctrine of the purification of souls after death by means of some sort of fire, which afterwards became so great a source of wealth for the clergy. Okay, that's one of the agendas, was the Benjamin. Okay, Bishop Wharton, an early Latin speaking, the early Roman Latin Church enforced the belief of a future state of rewards and punishments by every sort of contrivance. Okay? As per the transmigration of the souls, this was an ingenious solution invented, key word, invented by the Egyptian lawgivers to remove all doubts concerning the moral attributes of God. Okay, that's only 3 of dozens of documents that I've read, quotes from church historians and church leaders and church fathers that knew that people didn't believe this way. And they promoted it for a different agenda, politically and socially, and to keep people in order. And that was what was behind it all, okay? And more questioning. Why isn't the words eternal and hell together? Eternal hell or hell eternal. Why aren't those 2 words side by side anywhere in anyone's Bible? Now, if you want to assume that the word eternal, like if you change a word, damnation, to the word hell, you can find eternal damnation possibly in your Latin Vulgate translated Bibles, but you will not find eternal hell or hell eternal anywhere within Scripture. Okay, and why is that? And yet the majority of Christians believe in that, and yet it can't be found anywhere. That's a question of mine. Why can't you find that? Getting down to my last questioning, if I were to meet with some groups of folks in a setting, regardless if it was religious or not, and if I were to bring up in discussion, you know what? I believe the Holocaust that Hitler and his goons did, I think it was justifiable. I believe that there's a reason for it, and I believe the reason is valid, and I endorse it, and I defend it. The murder of 6 million plus Jews, plus countless gypsies and Christians and minorities and people with birth defects and on and on. And it was all for a very good reason, and I endorse it. I'd be tossed out of there so fast in any group. They'd think I was completely nuts. And yet, get this, I'm defending the Holocaust. And yet, why do Christians feel they need to defend hell? Why do they need to defend hell? What's going to take place in hell makes the Holocaust a walk in the park. Again, it's nothing compared to the eternal suffering, okay? Endless pain and suffering of people. You get my point. Now, I ask, is the reason why do Christians defend hell, why they feel it's so necessary? Is it possible that because traditionally everyone else does, and you just kind of go with the flow? Is that maybe one of the reasons? How about due to doctrines of men? Well, of course it's due to doctrines of men, because the doctrine of hell is a doctrine of men, even though most of my viewers don't agree with that. They think it's a doctrine of God. Is it due to brainwashing? Remember, Hitler is the one who said that if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes truth to the listener. Do you think possibly that might be why people defend hell? How about a sense of justice? Okay, it's a just thing. People deserve to be in hell. You know, believe me, my flesh agrees with that. Okay, my flesh agrees with that. My corrupted mind agrees with that. However, I want to address justice this way. Do you believe it's justice to give someone the death penalty for jaywalking, let's say? Or how about misspelling or something? You know, let's give somebody the death penalty for that. Well, better yet, let's give someone the sentence of eternal torture, suffering in hell for unbelief. Let's do that instead. Jaywalking is a far worse crime than unbelief, folks. But yet let's condemn somebody for all eternity. That isn't justice. Okay, so justice can't possibly be it. And last, or not last, but how about a motive of fear? And let me address fear this way. This is what kind of halted my wife and I. This is what was the biggest stumbling block to us, was no one, now here's a reason why you have to defend hell, because no one wants to admit of being deceived. Who wants to admit that I was deceived for so long by people that claimed they loved me and I loved them and I fellowship with them? We're deceived. No one wants to admit that. Okay? Well, folks, it's a good thing to admit that, because what ends up happening is it'll shake your world so bad, it'll rip so much out from underneath you that there'll be no other foundation. Okay? Nothing left will be left remaining except the love of God. And that one you can trust, folks, with everything that's inside of you, because His love is perfect, and the perfect love casts out all fear. And if you're fearful, you're not walking in perfect love. If any of these reasons have fear attached to them, they're not valid reasons to defend hell. Well, I'm signing off for now. This will be my last video on the subject of hell, even though I'll be bringing it up again. And I'm going to address on future videos, 3 separate videos, the big boys, the big daddies that people always bring up to support hell. I'm going to do a complete separate video on the Lazarus and the rich man, and also the sheep from separating the sheep from the goats, and the lake of fire. And I'm not going to include those in my hell series. I'm going to do separate videos on those altogether. Thank you for viewing, and remember, the perfect love of God casts out all fear. There's no need to fear about learning this stuff and researching it. Signing off for now.